Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann, and today we are thrilled to welcome actor, comedian, prolific voiceover artist from some of your favorites like Ben 10, Invader Zim, Richard Horvitz. Richard, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Jonathan. Hi, Ike.
Hey, man. Yeah, we decided to get the show started because Richard and I started jumping on some fun personal stories, and we thought, we'll save it for the show because people might be interested. Yeah, Richard, you and I go back a ways. I mean, we pretty much. I'm trying to remember. Did we meet during ADR? Is that when we initially?
Well, the truth of the matter is, because it is ingrained in my memory. You and I both attended Grant High School. And,
oh my God.
And I was at the 1981 homecoming when my friend Ike was crowned homecoming king.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I was younger than Ike. So
I never heard this story.
Yeah, he went to school with my sister Nancy, and I actually was in your brother Al's class, and that's how I met you originally when I used to tool around the valley in Al's souped up Volkswagen.
Oh, okay. Well, you remember those days. Yeah, my brother was a tad a bit on the wild, had a bit of a wild side to him, and yes, he had our family Volkswagen that was my first car, 1969 VW Bug that I'd restored to mint condition, then became my brother's car when he turned 16, and he ended up turning it into a street racer with some souped up engine, and it was just crazy. It was crazy times.
He would convince me to cut class at nutrition, and we would jump the fence on Oxnard. And he would go, come on, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I swear, he led me down a path of real danger, that kid.
Oh, yeah.
But we had typing class together back in the days when they taught typing in school. But yeah, and then you and I got to know each other very well on the ADR stages. In fact, my very first, I think, were we working with the Mad Dogs then or Lynn Redding? I think it might have been.
I never worked for Lynn Redding. I worked for Barbara Harris.
Yeah,
I started with Barbara Harris, and then of course we spun off with the Mad Dogs.
Yeah.
And for people who have no clue what we're talking about, ADR is a highly invisible kind of specialized area of voiceover work for film and TV shows, where we do background voices and sometimes revoicing of actors and filling in all kinds of different audio vocal needs for movies. And I started with a woman who cast who was like one of the largest in Hollywood by the name of Barbara Harris. And then a few of us decided we wanted to form our own group, and that's where the LA Mad Dogs reference is coming from. That's what we called ourselves. And so we were kind of a crazy bunch. And then because I did not work for Lynn. I never did. I just ended up moving over to the Mad Dogs, and that's when you and I started working together regularly.
My first intro into the Mad Dogs was you. You were coordinating, and you called me up, and I'm like, wow, Ike is calling me. I'm a huge fan of Ike's. That you have to know that. This is not me just blowing smoke up my friend's butt, but I was a huge fan of Ike. We both grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and there were two types of families in the San Fernando Valley. There were those who worked in aerospace, which my father did. He worked at Rocketdyne at one end of the valley, and the other end of the valley was Lockheed. And then there was all the showbiz kids, and that's where we all, I always was I was a big fan as a kid of Ike's and of, my friend Moosey Dreyer and a lot of our friends and Robbie Riss. We all grew up together, but they were doing TV and commercials and film. And I started in theater as a kid. There was a theater called the Aquarius Theater on Sunset, where Zoot Suit had just closed, and then Oliver opened up, and that was my.
That's what we was gonna ask you about that, of Oliver. So you did Oliver with Shaney Wallace, right?
Shaney Wallace and Dick Shawn and Stubby K. I mean, I don't know if any of these references, but
well, were you aware of them when you started this?
Dick Shawn for sure, because I loved everything from the producers and all the movies he had done. It's a mad world, and it was a joy. Stubby K I had known because I always loved musical theater, so I had seen him, of course, in Guys and Dolls with Frank Sinatra and Marlon Brando. But Tessie O'Shea was also in it. She played Mrs. Bumble, and Tessie O'Shea was huge in England. But the thing is that Tessie O'Shea was on the show in 1964, the same episode that the Beatles came to America. And that's how I knew Tessie O'Shea.
We had Mark Lester on from Oliver, and he adored Shaney Wallace. What your impressions of her?
I loved Shaney Wallace. I still have pictures that I have framed here at my house. Shaney was so kind to me and the rest of us, because there were only 8 workhouse boys, and 8, we were both the workhouse boys and Fagin's pickpockets. And she was just so kind, and she made sure that we all were doing well. And, when you're young, I mean, I say I was young. I was actually 14, and the rest of the kids were 8, because I was very, very small and looked very, very young, believe it or not.
You always have, and that's the hallmark of actually a successful career in those days, was being looking like 2 to 3 years younger than you actually are.
Exactly. It was, and I was probably pushing like 5 to 6 years younger than I actually was, right up until about I was maybe 20 something, where I started starting to look my age, and then I got married and had kids, and then I rapidly advanced.
Well, that's, I mean, I had no idea that you had a musical theater background. And so my connection to Oliver is the most horrific audition I have ever been on was me auditioning for Oliver at the Dorothy Chandler in 1971. And I had to get up and do the whole bit on that massive stage all by myself. And back then, when I was 9 years old, I looked like I was 6. I mean, I was tiny. And I didn't know how to sing. My father pushed me to try to do it. I had no idea how to do it. And it was just like the compliment was, that was the best audition we've had, but you obviously can't sing. So thank you very much. So I thought, okay, all right, this is showbiz, so that was it. So I'm as impressed about that as I am about anything else that you've done. So that's awesome.
Well, I'll tell you something. It was a shot in the dark, because I had actually trained in tap dancing. So I tap danced in the Valley at this place called Bill Bartlett's B&B studio on the corner of I think it was like Mammoth and Burbank Boulevard here in Van Nuys. And I love tap dancing. And so this audition came up because I was with an agent named Eileen Farrell back in the early days. Eileen Farrell represented me and Christina Applegate when we were young, and a lot of like future actors. But my mom didn't think I was going to get it, because she goes, "You can't sing." I'm like, yeah, thanks.
You go.
Thanks, Mom.
Right.
But I sang "The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow." Right. That was my audition number. And then my mom and dad had a trip planned, and I got a call back. So like my best friend's mom had to take me. And then I booked the job, and my parents were away on vacation. And so my sister, who had just had my niece, who's now 40 some years old, had to take me back and forth to the rehearsals at the Debbie Reynolds rehearsal studio on Lancashire. And they were also rehearsing Xanadu at the time with Olivia Newton-John and Gene Kelly. And they were rehearsing the roller skating number. And I was just in heaven. I met Gene Kelly. He was the sweetest man ever. Olivia was very sweet. It was just it was just like, it was my joy. I had always wanted to do musical theater. I wanted to be on Broadway. That was always my intention. But as Ike will tell you, when you grow up in Los Angeles and you're doing commercials and TV, there's no agents that are going to send you to New York for an 8-month or a year. And
Oh, yeah.
There was no money in it. So
exactly.
So I stayed here, and the irony is that I still hope to one day make it to Broadway. It's like, but now, I mean, because now I'm like the old guy. I'm like the Joel Grey era. It's like I did a musical here in LA not too many years ago for a company called By George Productions. It was a remake of a thing called Tiptoes. And I did another one called Red Hot and Blue by George M. Cohan or George Kaufman, one of them. And I was like learning the steps very slowly. And the dance captain came up to me and she said, she's like 20 years old, and she went, "You're doing really well." I'm like, oh my God, I'm that guy now. I'm the old character. I'm Stubby K now. I'm
There
Stubby
you
K.
Awesome.
I want to say we have a lot of questions. I want to say we've interviewed a lot of celebrities on here, and I've never
use that term very loosely when you talk about me.
I've never seen my son so excited as when I told him that you were going to be on the show. He absolutely, from when he was younger, he adored and loves still Ben 10. It was his favorite for years and years.
That's when I was gray matter. That's right, I forgot about
We're going to ask about that, but I'm just telling you, you scored a lot of points from me here in the house. But I do want to start with, you appeared in Safe at Home, the sitcom Safe at Home.
Yeah.
It was one of the first sitcoms on cable. And I tell my kids now how there's streaming services, sitcoms everywhere, that it wasn't like that.
I've had this conversation with friends lately because, as you get to a certain age, you start to realize you are the guy saying, "Hey, get your car off my lawn, get your dog off, don't curb your dog." But I think the difference is that when we were growing up, you could watch like the Brady Bunch or the Partridge Family, and you were growing up with them. And so it was a collective experience, meaning we were all talking about the same shows at school the next day. And so we were all watching the same thing at the same time. Now it's very hard to do that because there's I can't even remember what I watched last night or what I have to catch up on in streaming. And so I miss that experience of having the collective experience of all watching the last episode of MASH, etc., that sort of thing.
Well, how did you come to be on that show? I mean, because on the sitcom, that's what I'd like to hear.
So I had gotten into UCLA by the skin of my teeth because I was an okay student. I wouldn't get in today. And I had gotten into UCLA and USC, and my desire was to go to USC to study, to major in the Bachelor of Fine Arts program, because you didn't have to do any of your undergrad courses, because I did not want to do them again. And so you could skip all that. But my parents had said, we can't afford to send you to USC. And I was already going to be paying for my tuition from the money I had made when I was young to go to UCLA, which I could afford to pay for. But if I didn't get into the Bachelor of Fine Arts program, my parents said, we can't afford to send you to USC even back then. And sure enough, I didn't make it into the Bachelor of Fine Arts program. I was denied because, quote unquote, I was too commercial. And that was their reason, because they said, well, you already have experience, so you're not going to commit to this program. If you get a commercial or something, you're going to be gone. And I'm like, no. But I was rejected.
Wow.
And that's rare. That's rare in this business to be rejected.
Oh yeah. So, it almost never happens, especially for those reasons.
It never happens for those reasons. So I was fortunate that, I've spoken about it often. Grant High School, where both Ike and I attended, there was a drama teacher there named Park McAllister, who really took me under his wing, and he this is a roundabout way to get to your question, Jonathan, but I'll get there, I promise. So Park, he gave me a shot. He let me be Danny Zuko in Grease, and he let me be by Conrad Birdie in Bye Bye Birdie. And he wrote a letter to UCLA's theater arts department where they only let 60 kids across the country in a year. And he said, you've got to take him. He's great, blah, blah, blah. In fact, he wanted his partner to represent me as an actor, to be my manager. It just, that never panned out. But to get to your question, I got to UCLA and I didn't get housing, which at the time, the dorms were overfilled, and it was my first year of college. And I had ended up having to rent an apartment on Veteran Avenue with upperclassmen who had no time for a freshman. And I was miserable at UCLA for that one quarter. In the meantime, I was still auditioning, and I got an audition for a show called Safe at Home. And I, couldn't stand school. I already established that I'm not a real student. I'm an autodidact, but when it comes to like structured learning, I'm not great at it. And so I said, I got the job, and I said, well, it's just going to be the pilot. I'll just take a day off of school, or a week off of school, or whatever it was. And then it said, oh, we got picked up for the season. Well, okay, I'll just take a leave of absence for a semester. And it ended up going 105 episodes.
Oh my gosh.
And then from there, I went into film work and voiceover, et cetera. But I never got back. And there's a part of me that couldn't go back because I have abandonment issues, to be honest with you. And the fact that everyone had gone on to had already gone on and done all the courses, and to go back to being in a place where I knew no one anymore, and they had all graduated or were graduating, I just never did. And it's highly unusual that you find people that don't go to college that started out as child actors.
But I mean, the bottom line was you were rejected legitimately because you ended up doing exactly what they said.
Exactly what they said.
Yeah. So so there it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
My justification was I was majoring in theater arts, and I could have gone and done the 4-year program just to get out and go back to auditioning for everything I wanted to do. And there wasn't anyone that's going, oh, wait a minute, you have a degree from UCLA in theater arts, you've got the part. So
exactly.
So I was,
and then you're out of the field for 4 years, and
exactly.
Everybody forgets you. They forget you very, very quickly. Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
I still get, do you still act? Yeah.
No, my favorite story from a casting director was when I was finally shifting into more mature roles in my early 20s. And by my mid 20s, I was already starting to say, I don't know if I really want to do this anymore, because I've been doing it my whole life. I was quite exhausted, tired. I couldn't stand auditioning anymore, and it was starting to show. You walk in with any kind of attitude or negativity, and it's like that's just the death of you. And one of the things that just kind of pushed me over the edge was I went and read for a casting director who was casting a film, and I don't know what it was, who was 3 years younger than me. He was like 21 years old.
Yeah.
And I handed my resume, which at that time was very long indeed.
Yeah.
And he's looking at all my credits. And he literally said to me, and I had just worked on something. I had just done a job like 6 months prior to that, but it had been 6 months since I booked anything. And he said, yeah, this is all great, but what have you done lately?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh. All right. Well, and he had no idea. He'd never seen, he had no idea who I was as a child actor, even though he looked at everything in there. None of it meant anything to him. It was like whatever I'd done in the last 6 months was all that really mattered to move forward. And I thought, this is just one of those parts of the business that's getting under my skin, so. And I just had enough, but yeah, it's like you dip out for a while, and they're not everybody's Jodie Foster. You can't necessarily turn back around and turn it into a massive career.
It's the same with talent agents too, because I never thought that I would be without a theatrical agent. And because I hadn't done any theatrical work in a while, agents kept passing on me. I'm like, what? I've had an agent since I was, 10 years old. What are you talking about? And their answer was always, come back when you have some fresh stuff. And I would always respond, why would I come back to you if I get fresh stuff and you didn't get it for me? So, I mean, it's just, and I totally concur with you about the way the industry has changed. I mean, when we were young, we had the same group of people we were auditioning for. We saw the same guys, and we're still friends to this day. Like I mentioned, Moosey and I are still really close. But back then, we went in and we met with the producers, we met with the directors, and you got to be in the room with them, and they could direct you and see what you're like and what you'll be like on the set, etc. And then after a while, it became, oh no, now you meet the casting director, and then they make you come back in the afternoon or the next day to meet the producers. And then it became the casting director and an assistant on a VHS camera. And then it became just the casting director, just the assistant with the VHS camera. And now it's just record yourself at home. And I lost my love for that part.
Yeah.
I always liked the audition process because I was never nervous. I'd been doing it since we were young. And, but a lot of people love the home taping because you can do multiple takes, etc. I like you got one shot and you're out thing because you just moved on with it. But when you're at home doing it, you're like, is the lighting okay? Wait a second. Am I shooting the right thing that they want? How do I do a head to toe? Anyway. So that's how I did that show, Jonathan.
By way of UCLA, I love it.
There's a lot of people in that show. People left, and you left in the last season. Is that just to go do summer school?
Safe at Home, yeah. So what happened was it became an unpleasant set after a while, and we weren't getting everything that we had been promised. Like for example, I said we did 105 episodes in 3 years. Ike will tell you, and you'll know, that's a lot of episodes per year. So they started taking hiatuses away and stuff like that. And what ended up happening is I didn't realize that I had signed an exclusive contract for this show. And so when we finally did get a hiatus, I was like really in a place where I was like feeling miserable, and I didn't want to be one of those, bitter actors at 22 years old. I was already one at 11. And so, so I was determined to go book something. And that's when I got a call from my agents at the time that said, hey, Carl Reiner's doing this movie. It's being produced by Shapiro West, and they're having trouble casting this nerd character because I had a tendency to play the nerd a lot, which was a stretch, I'm sure you can imagine. And and so I went in and I read with Carl Reiner, and Carl Reiner at the end of the audition stood up and he said, get out of here. You're perfect. And then he walked out. I'm like, oh, it was the first job I ever literally, especially on camera, booked on the spot. And so they made the offer to my agents that literally by the time I'd gotten home. And the problem is that Safe at Home wasn't going to let me out of my contract.
Wow.
And so now I've got managers saying, well, you'll have to declare bankruptcy. I said, I'm 22. I don't want to declare bankruptcy, and so what ended up happening is I had to buy my way out of my contract at Safe at Home. And then I was able to do, so everything I was making on summer school, I was paying to the Safe at Home, the Arthur Company, to just be able to shoot it. And I'm glad I did. It was worth it.
Not bad to start with your movie career with Carl Reiner.
And that was great and bad at the same time, because I had done a bunch of low budget things, but but this was the first thing where I met a lot of my friends that Ike and I have in common, Dean Cameron, Patrick Laberto. In fact, that's how I reconnected with Ike, is that we have a mutual friend, Allison Arngrim, who played Nellie Olson on Little House, and Ike was on Little House, and Allison was a fan of Invader Zim, believe it or not, and that's how we became friends. And I did her podcast. She has a podcast, and when Allison retweeted Ike's tweet about Dear Ike, which I cannot wait to see, by the way, I cannot wait to see Dear Ike. Yeah, I immediately followed Ike because I had lost touch with you, and I really have thought about you often over the past years, and I wanted to reconnect. I'm so happy that you reached out, and that's how I did summer school.
That is an absolutely amazing story, and what a huge risk to take. I mean, that, you know, that's a big deal, and at a young age. You know, I mean, I know we were all pretty savvy by the time we were in our early 20s, but there's that, you know, there's all this fear factor about do you let go of one job because it is a job and it is going on and it is paying you for, you know, a movie that, even with Carl Reiner attached, that doesn't always mean, you know, I mean, it doesn't always mean it's going to be worthwhile or any good, or let alone have the lasting power that summer school did. So that was a very courageous decision on your part, and well played.
Yeah, it was funny because Mark Harmon starred in that movie, and I spent a lot of time with Mark, and he had left Saint elsewhere to do his movie career, and and Dean Cameron had just been, and Courtney Thorne-Smith had both just been in Fast Times, the TV series, which Dean's still kicking himself to this day for doing. But, you're right. We were young, and that, you know, we thought, we're going to always be working. It's always going to be this way, you know?
Yeah.
And Mark said to me, you got to quit that show, because I could have gone back to Save at Home. And he goes, you got to do film. You got to do film. But at the same time, he was dating, at the time, Pam Dauber, who eventually became his wife. And Pam would meet us on the set, and we'd eat together during, you know, lunch or dinner breaks if it was a night shoot. And she would say, you know, don't leave TV. She said, I used to sit in the commissary with all the sweat hogs. And I was so cocky and arrogant back then, because I just was. I said to her, yeah, look what happened to John Travolta. He should never have left Welcome Back, Kotter. It was just, I those are moments that I have, and the funny, and I regret those moments, because you're young, and I didn't want to be Shecky Green, but I always felt like Shecky Green, you know. But not too many years ago, I got an email from Mark Harmon, but I didn't know it was Mark. And he said, hey, Richard, it's Mark. Give me a call at the office. I'm like, what is this, man? You know, what is this, right? So I dial up the number, and they say, Mark Harmon's office. I'm like, oh, hey, it's Rich Horvitz. Mark sent me an email, told me to call him. Yeah, hold on. He goes, Richard. And I hadn't spoken to Mark in, excuse me, I hadn't spoken to Mark in maybe 10 years at that point or more. And he says, Richard, I have a favor to ask of you. And I said, what's that? And he goes, you remember the cast pictures that Carl gave us at the wrap of summer school? I said, yeah. He said, everyone signed mine, including you, but you signed in like a reddish pen that is fading. And can you meet me at the frame store in Santa Monica and re-sign it? And I said, that's so funny, because I have a spot on my picture where everyone signed it but you. He goes, well, bring it and I'll sign it. So we meet up in Santa Monica at the frame store. And he goes, I want you to write exactly what you wrote on the picture. I just want you to write exactly where it was, where it's signed. I'm like, I don't want to, Mark. And he said, why? I said, because I'm embarrassed. He said, just write. Okay. And this is what I had written. Mark, when I was cast in summer school, everyone asked me if I was going to play Mark Harmon's younger, sexier brother. And because he had been voted sexiest man alive. And, so I was just so embarrassed. You know, youth and age are great learning curves, right? And so he wrote on mine, he said, I wrote exactly what I would have written if I had signed it that night. And he had written the sweetest thing, like, you know, your joy and your fun of your playfulness on set was a great blah, blah, blah. Really just sweet. And so then the framing person put the frame back in and it was all done. And I went, wait, I'm still here. And Mark said, what do you mean? I said, well, I thought once we signed each other's photos, I would quantum leap back into my on-camera career. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, Mark, I'm going to be brutally honest. Everyone in that movie, like Patrick went on to do JAG, you went on to do NCIS and another movie, Kirsty, blah, 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 blah. And he said, my kids loved your cartoons. They grew up on them. What are you talking about? And so you don't see it that way sometimes in that. The irony of this whole story is this, is that day I got home and I got a call from the casting person that said I had landed this role in a movie called The Informant, where I play Matt Damon's attorney along with Tony Hale. And one of the stars is Scott Bakula, who is in Quantum Leap. So I wrote to Mark, I said, your magic autograph landed me this role. See, I told you. And of course, Mark in Mark fashion wrote back, your talent and your ability got you further than any magic. And I'm like, oh, Mark, stop being so nice. Stop being so nice.
Well, it's clearly obviously true. I mean, especially, I mean, in your voiceover career, which I kind of want to shift over to for a second, because I'm kind of curious why, like, it seems like you started that a little bit later than I would have assumed. Because I mean, let's just be honest, walking in the door, you've got a unique sounding voice, perfect for this, that industry.
Yes.
Were anyone trying to pull you into it at all? Or when did you finally decide, I think it's time for me to do this?
So
when
when Summer School came out in '87, we all thought it was going to be this launching board, you know, and what happened was by '88, we were in that horrible Writers Guild strike.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah. And so there was no way to capitalize on it. And by the time the strike ended, and you remember, it was horrific.
Oh, yeah.
It was horrible. Nobody remembered Summer School. And
I love the movie, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Oh yeah, no, Jonathan is a huge fan, and I have to say, I had never seen it until this weekend. I'm so embarrassed to say that. So I'm now on board with the fandom here.
Please, because you know I'm very dear friends with Dean Cameron. I talk to him daily, and he played Chainsaw. And years ago, we did like the audio track for the DVD. And I said to Dean, I can't watch it. And he said, why? I said, I can't stand what I'm doing. Look at the faces I'm making. I'm so over the top. And Dean said, it was the 80s, Richard. That's how we were all doing it. I'm like,
oh, yeah.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I guess you're right. I think. But anyway, so voiceover was this. So I was going broke, to be brutally honest. I wasn't working when the strike ended. When the strike ended, all of a sudden, you know, things like quotes started to disappear, which, you know, for those of you listening, quotes are like how much your weekly quote is for a guest star. And, you know, with each job, your quote goes up, And all of a sudden, all these like mega stars, these film stars are doing the TV series and doing what they call stunt casting. And it became harder and harder to even book a guest spot anymore. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. And a friend of mine named Michael J. Cutt, who was on Safe at Home with me, he said, you know, you should go into voiceover. And he said, our agency at the time, which is the Susan Nathy agency, they had a commercial. They shared an office with a voiceover agent named Sandy Schnarr. And this is how naive I was about voiceover. The only thing I knew about voiceover was I knew cartoons. I knew Speed Racer, which was my favorite show growing up. And I walked over to Sandy and I said, I want to do voiceover. And she said, okay, well, you've got to get a demo reel. Like a demo reel? Yeah, okay. So I went and made a commercial demo reel, which was a reel to reel back then. And I invested, you know, $1,500 to get multiple copies and another $1,500 to like send them out. And I don't even remember how I got the money. I probably had to borrow the money. But this is how naive I was. The first month I was at Sandy's, I booked 3 radio commercials. And the first one was for Chevy. And it was like, bye, Dad. That's all I said. And of course, my ego went to Sandy. That's all I say. And she says, honey, the person that does the tag at the end with at Chevy, you can blah, 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 gets paid the same amount as bye, Dad. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good. And at the time, you got paid $175 per spot per cycle for a 13-week cycle. And you went in, and it was like, for commercials, it was only an hour-and-a-half job. And this is how naive I went. I went, wow, I didn't know anything about voiceover, but if I do 5 of these a day, 5 days a week, that's really what I'm thinking, 5 days a week, I could be making like $5,000 a week easy. And by the way, that math is completely off, and it'll tell you why I dropped out of college. But that was the last time I worked in voiceover that year. And it took me 5 years to break into animation. But once I did and I got there, that was like I said recently, it was like the ugly duckling coming home, because the fact of the matter is that Ike hit it on the head. He hit it spot on the head when he said your voice is unique, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad. It wasn't good for my on-camera career, because they would say he doesn't look like he sounds, which was what it kept coming down to for me. And the other thing is that Ike and I have been on stages together looping where they're going, no, Richard's voice is standing out because it cuts above everybody else's voice. And so that, I mean, I really loved the looping gigs, and Ike and the Mad Dogs kept me afloat for a long time. So I was grateful for that. And the Mad Dogs were the only ones who never really said to me, make sure you use your lower voice. You know, I think they always just let me be, which is why I loved working with the Mad Dogs. But that's how I got into animation. It took me 5 years. And then, you know, that's where I kind of found my home. But the funny thing is that you still know it's me, Jonathan. Your son would know me in every show I do.
He loves you.
And he would know me because he recognizes my voice. And the reason is that you would argue, well, you have to have a million different voices for animation. You really don't. You just have a million different stories, because for me, it all became about telling the story. Because I would go to a movie and I would say, okay, Robert De Niro uses the same voice in not in The Godfather, in Casino as he does in Goodfellas, as he does in The Irishman. And we follow him into the story because the story becomes more important than him. And when I learned that lesson, that to tell the story was more important than to impress, you know, be an expresser as opposed to an impressor, it changed my entire career, because you could argue that Chaos from Skylanders is exactly the same as Zim, but it's not, because it's a different world. I have a different set of wants as that character. And it's just been a joy for me to like voiceover in animation in particular was a godsend. You know, it supported my family. I have 3 kids that have all gone through college, and my third is finally in his first year of college. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Congratulations on that point.
Yeah.
But, you know, I have to say, having grappled with doing voiceover myself, because I've always done it. I actually just, this will be on way too late to anyone to check this out, but I posted on Twitter today a commercial that I'm so lucky I have from 1972, because I did the Little Green Sprout for the Jolly Green Giant commercials for a couple of years.
And I knew that.
And oh, wow. Okay. My God. Yeah.
I'm not kidding. I was an Ike fan. That's why I cannot wait to see. I am an Ike fan. I don't say I was, but I am an Ike fan.
Well, thank you endlessly. Yeah. You're so kind. But I had so much fun doing it. And it was, when I was growing up, it was just because there was a voiceover department in my agency, and, you know, I was with them and they said, no, you should try this. And then I got that. And then I started getting other things. but then growing up with it and getting into the much more competitive market when you're in your teens or your 20s, and now you're competing with those people. I swear to God, I mean this for sure, for real, like you, who are so amazingly gifted at it. You have to have something special. And it's very obvious when you listen to the characters that you do. So taking you 5 years to break into it, I want to know, did you go to classes to learn? Because it's a whole different skill set. And I'm just saying this for everybody who's listening. Just because you have an interesting voice or you can do an interesting voice doesn't mean anything unless you can perform. And what Richard just said is so true about drawing someone into the story. But you have to perform at an energy level and a dynamic level that other actors don't ever have to touch. And it takes a lot of skill, and there's a lot of learning involved. So I'm just wondering how you developed. Did you just hit or miss, make it there and learn on the job, or did you study it?
That's a really good question, Ike. Like I said, I was kind of ego driven when I started. So I thought to myself, I can do this. I can do anything, because that's just kind of that. It's kind of that kid thing that we go back to where you just are always precocious and on, because that was my thing. I was always kind of on. And it took years of therapy to stop being on, to be honest with you. But what happened with me was they wanted me to do an animation demo and they wanted me to take, some classes. But at the time I didn't. And that is why why it took me 5 years probably to break into animation. But in that time, I had taken a class and with a woman who changed my life. Her name is Diana Castle, and she taught something called the Imagined Life. And I came to Diana Castle just kind of a broken actor, meaning I was broke, I wasn't working, I wasn't booking anything. The only thing I had done was a movie in Romania for 3 months, like right after the fall of communism. And she put my head on straight because I decided I didn't want to play the nerd anymore. And she looked at me and she goes, "You say you don't want to play the nerd." She goes, "So what do you do when you go out on these auditions? You slick your hair down, you put on a bow tie with, flooded pants and white socks." And I'm thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I do. And she says, "It's interesting that you think of things from a point of view as someone who's actually judging the character they're creating. You're making a comment on it because you don't want to be seen. You, Richard, don't want to be seen as the nerd. That's why you don't want to do that anymore." And she goes, "But, nerds don't think of themselves as nerds. And this is, pre-Silicon Valley where we all gladly, wave our nerd flags today." She said, "Why don't you think of yourself as someone who feels awkward going out to bars or meat markets or, parties because you feel judged and awkward and self-conscious, and you'd rather stay home, hanging out with friends, playing role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons where you don't feel judged and you can be just who you are." She said something to me. She said, "Stop thinking as an actor and remember what it is to be a human being." And it was just that one shift. And I embarked on a 5-year journey in that time that it took me to get to the animation job, where I had to go up. I had to really confront that I had been taught to perform, that we're always taught to perform when we're young. And I had to break that need for the audience validation because she said to me, and this is what really changed my whole outlook. She gave me a monologue. I did the monologue. And then she sat there afterwards. It was great. I did a great job with the monologue. She said, "Boy, you're really product oriented." And I said, "Thank you." She goes, "No, I mean, your comedy is impeccable. Your timing is great." I said, "Thank you. I've been doing it a long time." She goes, "But you're great at drama too." I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "I bet you can feel that audience. When that punchline's coming, and then you hit them with that punchline and boom, you got them. Or you can feel the sniffles in the room and you feel that room and you feel it and you're going to massage it till you really bring them to tears." I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty good at that. Yeah, I've been doing it a long time." And she finally said, "What happens when they don't laugh? What happens when they don't cry? What happens to you?" And I said, well, it's probably a Friday night. Nobody wanted to go to their friend's play anyway. They got out of work late. They couldn't get parking. And she goes, no, that's your defense mechanism. You always joke because that makes you not deal with your feelings. And I said, she goes, you know what you do. You push harder to get them back. And if you can't get them back, you either blame them, but really you're blaming yourself because you didn't get the validation to tell you you're good at something.
Mm.
And I know this seems like really a long way to go to answer your question about training in animation, but that was my training in animation, because I approach every story, regardless of the medium, the exact same way. Story. And how do I serve this story? And the best training ground for animation is sketch comedy and improv, to be honest with you. Sketch comedy and improv, because you're present in that situation and not just relying on the animation to carry it. In fact, I've had artists come up to me multiple times saying, we didn't know how we were going to transition that scene, and then you improv that line, or you made that sound, and we totally knew how we were going to animate it. And so I'm always very flattered by that. So my training was acting training, but it was more than acting. It was more about breaking down who I was and what I bring to the table, which is why I know I feel like I'm just monopolizing here, Jonathan. You just cut me off when you want. But the fact of the matter is I had to say to myself at some point when we audition for so many of these animated things or anything, is that I give up my need to book. I give up my need to be good. I give up my need to make money. I give up my need to impress. I give up my need to compete, because I came to the realization, and this is why it works in animation, is that my job is to play pretend and play pretend fully. Total definition. That's all I do is play pretend. And that's what it comes down to. And I'm very fortunate that I discovered that at an age when I was at a crucial part in my life where I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. So,
well, that is no. I'm just going to say this is extraordinary for people who don't know much about the industry. When you hear the process that creative people, and it's like actors are creative people, and it is a creative process. And the thing is, you pull up Richard Horvitz IMDb page and you say, oh my God, look at all that. Obviously, one thing just spills into another. It just all comes because one has talent, and there's this entire internal struggle that goes on, because very much the reason why I moved out of the business, I didn't move out of the business, I moved into ADR. That was my super fortunate discovering that, because I lost that I lost that desire to get to the place that you figured out you had to get to. I was tired, I was jaded, I was done, I was angry, and I would rather stay home and paint my house than go on an audition. And I thought, but I'm like 25 years old, I've got to make, we have to earn a living. So my area was ADR. That saved my life. I loved it. It was fantastic. But all of this requires a process. And so I don't know, Jonathan was going to jump in with something. I'd love to hear what it is.
No, there are a couple of things that Ike and I were talking ahead of time. There are a couple of, you have so many roles, and I want to hit some of them. But when did it become from you also that it was like, you're auditioning for things, and like, you're going out on audition after audition? When did it become from you having to do that to get me Horvitz, for the, that I want him?
Well, so you do kind of hit your stride at some point where for me, I went from, I was doing Invader Zim and another show called The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy at the same time. And, you're pretty much just taking everything that comes your way, including we were doing ADR at the same time I was doing those shows and stuff. And there's a great voice actor by the name of Charlie Adler. I don't know if you know Charlie, but Charlie's great. He was in a ton of stuff. And Charlie said to me one day, and we're similar because we're both very energy-based animation guys. And Charlie said to me, he goes, and he's still a dear friend, and I seek his counsel all the time. He said, there's going to come a time where they're going to say, get me Richard. And then they're going to say, there's too much Richard. Jeez. And that did happen. that did happen with
Mm.
Nickelodeon. And so I was able to, transition over to Cartoon Network and Disney. And then eventually they brought me back at Cartoon Network. And so to answer your question, Jonathan, I'm still kind of in, I had a great, to be blunt, last year was a great year, despite this thing called the pandemic. Because I've had my own home studio since, before, years. I've had it for 16 years or more now. I had, I had 2 big video games that came out. I have a new show that I'm not only in, but I'm voice directing. And the beauty of that is that it's musical theater. It's animation with musical theater actors, all on Broadway, in Beetlejuice and Aladdin and Hamilton. And I'm like, yes, I sort of made it back to where I kind of started out to be. And we have to sing on the show. And then when I hear these singers, I'm like, okay, now I know I'm not on Broadway. Okay, so I'm going to be like talking my roles when I'm on Broadway. I'll be like Rex Harrison.
The Rex Harrison,
rain,
yes.
That's right. The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain.
Well,
So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
The thing is, Jonathan, is like I get emotionally attached to the projects I'm on, and so a lot of voice actors just they do their job and they go on to their next job that day. But for me, I want to be a part of the entire creative process. So my really good friends have been the show creators, casting people, where I get to visit with them and become friends and understand what it is, other than just going, yay, and walking out. And so I want to be a part of it. It's actually how I got to start writing along with my wife, Kristen, for Billy and Mandy, The Grim Adventures. We wrote 2 of those episodes. But I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, Jonathan. I don't know if there's ever been a Get Me Horvitz.
I think there is. I definitely think there is. I'm curious, has sometimes the character changed, the creator changed the character based on your voice interpretation of it?
Absolutely. Jonan Vasquez, the creator of Invader Zim, will often say in interviews that I was not what he had imagined the character of Zim, but what I brought to it compared to what he thought about and the combination, he said that was what was Zim. When we worked together, he said that's Zim. And so, yeah. So I bring how I see something, I'm not right for everything. There's oftentimes they'll say, he's too over the top. But the fact of the matter is that there are people who are over the top by nature, and I'm one of them. Robin Williams was over the top by nature. Jim Carrey is over the top by nature. And if Jim Carrey or Robin Williams, if he were still alive, were around today and they were just starting out in animation, they'd say they're too over the top. But they never stop doing what it is they do. And eventually it came around to them. And so that's what I always remember, that I'm not right for everything. And I know that, I know that my Superman is going to be different than Ike's Superman is going to be different than Jonathan's Superman. Right. But just because one of us books the role doesn't mean we beat anyone out or that someone was better than us. This is my Superman. This is how I would play if I were on the playground. If you look at the classic breakdown of Superman, 6'3", 6'4", eyes of blue, wavy black hair, muscle body, baritone voice. I may not be what the casting people or the producers are looking for, but I can play as Superman because I did as a child. Right. Yeah. And I didn't think, is this what I sound like? Wasn't thinking, is this how he sounds? And I'm just because I don't book the job doesn't mean I didn't get the part. That's how I would play. That's how I would play,
I do want to hit some of the roles so I don't get killed in the comments. Like, why didn't you ask about this? I want to start with like Angry Beavers. I read that things weren't always rosy between Nickelodeon and Mitch Schauer for.
mainly it's because we got behind schedule.
Mhm.
That's what it was. And at one point we were up to almost a year behind schedule, and that's a
wow.
lot of money. And
Wow.
but it was a great show. It was my first very big. I'm very fortunate that the creators that I've worked with, like Mitch Schauer, always understood how I played, and they let me go off. In fact, if you ever watch that show, it's one of the first animated series in history where the characters are allowed to overlap the other ones.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is,
interesting.
yeah, and the reason for that is because Mitch wanted to be like real brothers that talk over each other, and we were allowed to improvise. Nick Bakay and I we got along famously, and we just really could improvise on it with each other. We always had a sense for what the other person was going to say or where they were going to take the scene. And to this day, people will come up to me at those pop culture conventions and say, "Oh my God, that was my brother. I was Daggett, he was Norbert," and blah, blah, blah. Or my dad loves that show. So I'm very proud of that. But yeah, it was just because we were behind schedule. That's
and Mitch wanted to kill everyone off. Is that true at the last episode? That's what I read.
I can neither confirm nor deny that. But if you ever listen to the tape of the last episode, which never was animated, it's all about how Norbert is explaining to Daggett that we had been canceled. And we're like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, it means, Dag, that this show will go on in perpetuity and you won't see a dime." Which is not true. Still seeing those, 99-cent residuals and $1.15.
I mean, I can't. If what I read was right, Nickelodeon was ridiculous to me. A lot of things that they complained about, but I can't blame them for not wanting to kill off characters of a beloved series. So.
Yeah. I mean, I have a running joke with Dean Cameron, who I mention often because he and I work together still, is that whenever they say you're a cult classic figure or you're in a cult classic, it's just a very nice euphemism for commercially unsuccessful. That's what cult means. Cult classic is commercially unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Invader Zim was commercially unsuccessful at the time, but like Star Trek, it went on to have a life after 27 episodes. That's all we ever did, and I
was going to ask about Invader Zim, but I have to hit first Ben 10 since my son's favorite.
Yeah.
So I gotta ask about that. No, did you ever get pissed off that Ben always got the credit when it was really Gray Matter that did a lot of the hard legwork?
You know what I got pissed off at was the fact that nobody wants to be the little character. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to be a little character that can make themselves small and crawl through the electrical system. They want to be, the guy that can shoot fireballs and blades from their hands and everything. No, nobody's going, "Oh, I want to be Gray Matter," which, by the way, was just Johnny Carson on helium, if you listen to it. And so basically Ben 10 was a great show, but it was basically they had sold the toy rights first.
Oh, wow.
And so they already had a whole line of toys coming out. And so the much like Saban, the show was a big commercial for the toys.
Were you pissed that you're not?
Don't tell your
reboot?
son that.
Oh, no.
The reboot, no, they've replaced us several times. There's been several different people that have played Gray Matter, but I was the original Gray Matter. So
All right, let's hit Invader Zim because it's such a funny show. And is this true? Was Mark Hamill cast first in this as you're in Zim?
Mark was never cast.
Okay.
He was considered. He was in serious contention. And then Billy West was cast as Zim. But what I like to explain to everyone, because it's been the legend is incorrect, and it's been like a mission of mine to correct this thing. Like Nickelodeon will say the never before aired pilot of Invader Zim starring Billy West. But the fact of the matter is if you listen to the pilot, it's half Billy, half me. And I came into ADR over Billy.
Wow.
And that's why I didn't get the credit on the thing. So what happened was I was doing Angry Beavers and we were still in the middle of our final season. And Jonan was a fan of mine, the creator, and he wanted me to play Zim, but I didn't know that at the time. So I came in for the audition and I thought I was going to be auditioning for the role of Dib because that was kind of more the kind of roles I played. I didn't know he wanted me for Zim. So it turned out that the executive producer of the Beavers was also the executive producer of Zim. And they came to me and they said, Jonan really wants you, but you're already on Angry Beavers and we don't want to double up the voice. So, we're not going to go with you. And I was heartbroken. It was like devastating. And this has happened many times in my career, to be honest with you. So I didn't do the pilot. Angry Beavers ended and they had done the pilot. It hadn't aired yet. And Jonan came back to me and said, now that you're not on there, I want you to come in. I want you to do the Zim. I'm going to tweak it a little with pitch and then I'm going to submit it. And that's how I ended up doing Invader Zim. So I dubbed over Billy and Billy and I are good friends. So it's, in voiceover, that's the difference between a lot of things. In voiceover, we get when other people replace us. Unless it's for money, then we don't get it because if they if people who have been doing jobs for years, like the Looney Tunes, they decide they're going to recast, we know that that's just a bargaining thing to say, oh, they'll do it for less. So let's fire these guys. And there's an ethics code there. Like, we're not going to do that to our friends.
Because I was just loving that somewhere there was a conversation in Nickelodeon, Mark Hamill's not cutting it. Get me Horvitz.
I've worked with Mark a lot in voiceover. He's a great guy. And it's, and it's like, I know he needed it because he needed the money. But
no, that was another show that Nickelodeon gave problems about the content. Is that?
Oh yeah. And sometimes it made us funnier because we were not allowed to say the underworld.
Wow.
And so Jonan came up with, call it the place. Call it the place under the overworld. And that I thought was more creative than calling it the underworld. We weren't like in even Angry Beavers, we weren't allowed to say shut up. And so we had to come in and revoice the ADR, shut up to hush up. And then they aired the shut up version anyway. So
oh wow.
Yeah. I mean, you look at it, it's kind of sporadic, or what's the word that I'm looking for? It's ambiguous the way they decide what they're going to air and what they don't, because if you look at Rugrats, Angelica says, shut up, you little babies, all the time. But because the theme of that was little babies, it's like, oh, it's okay for the older sister to say shut up, but
so the thing was they wanted a mature content cartoon or animated program, and then they changed their minds after.
Jonathan, you're getting into the thick of it, as they say.
We can edit this all out.
No, the answer is this, is that they didn't know what they were getting. And bless Mary Harrington, because she had her finger on the pulse of art. And speaking of artists, and I want to go back, Ike saying that he sits and paints his house. No, he paints. He's an amazing painter. Aren't you, Ike? And because
yes, I'll admit to that. Thank you.
Yes, he is an amazing painter. I've seen a lot of his work. The answer, Jonathan, is that Mary Harrington had heard of Jonan's Johnny the Homicidal Maniac comic book. And she's like, I had to meet this guy. And she goes, would you be interested in creating a show for us? And, Jonan was like 25 years old, he's like, yeah, sure. And he came up with this, and that was his sensibility. And, bless him for never really, giving in to that vision. I mean, it was our downfall ultimately, but he actually was right in the long run because the show stood for itself. And so when they realized what this show was, when it first started airing, our ratings were horrible.
Hmm.
Horrible ratings, because it wasn't the right demographic
Platform also.
Yeah, people often say if it had been on Cartoon Network or something like that, it would have been a different experience. But it was where it was supposed to be when it was there. I mean, it does me no good to think of should-haves and could-haves anymore.
Well, the show became much more popular after. I mean, this is amazing to me that it became more popular after it left the air than when it was on. And there were conventions, Zim conventions, and Nickelodeon did a movie last year about it, and it's on Netflix. I mean, so did you ever think at the time that you'd ever revisit this character again, or you just, that's it, it's over?
Yeah, I did. I inherently kind of knew. Same with the Beavers. I inherently knew that the Beavers were ahead of their time. Zim was way ahead of its time. Mm-hmm. Thanks to Hot Topic, in great part, the show Invader Zim did really well in spite of the desire to put it on a shelf and never be heard from again. And when they had come to Jonan multiple times to go back to do the show, and he just never was into it. It was like he had it wasn't his medium at the time. It is now. But he had turned them down quite often. And then when he got a really good idea, he called me up one day and said, I got this idea. And I knew it was going to happen the minute he started telling me the story, because as he's telling the story, he is so into it. And I'm going, okay, this is going to happen. And that's what happened. And that's how we did it. Now, at the time, the group at Nickelodeon loved Invader Zim, and we had hopes for a reboot and everything. But by the time the movie was done, which took a long time again, which it probably shouldn't have, but there was a lot of changes along the way. The entire development team at Nickelodeon and all the uppers had changed, and now they didn't like Invader Zim again. So,
gosh. So is there now any talk or any plans to do any more Zim content in the future?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. I think I would be one of the first ones to know, and I don't think so. But I never say never, except I just said never 3 times. But maybe everything's a maybe in life. So.
Well, especially these days. I mean, my gosh, it's like things turn around and stuff resurfaces all the time, and that seems to be the state of affairs. So I think maybe is a very safe word to use.
I will tell you, I'm a nostalgia freak. I people say I live in the past, and I kind of do in a way. And one of the things I started going back and doing is buying up all the old toys that I had when I was a kid. I had a GE show and tell player, which was this TV set that had a record player on top with a slide that you would play. It was a 1964 GE show and tell viewer. And when my sister saved up money, she bought me one, and it didn't work. And when we took it back to Sears, when we took it back to the will call at Sears, was this chain at the Sears at Valley Plaza. They're like, well, we don't have this anymore, so we'll give you a Chitty Chitty Bang Bang helmet and some goggles. And so it broke my heart. And I finally found one on eBay. I found that. I found my original Hot Wheels Turbo sprint track with the car wash. And I
love it.
Yes, yeah, I bought it. But the reason I bring that up is because I'll be brutally honest. I love seeing the pictures that you're posting from your career, Ike. I just love
thank you.
It. Yeah, you and Pat Laberto also has been posting things.
Yeah, he started doing a lot of stuff very recently. Yeah,
very recently. Yeah. And because I love. Look, as you get older, you go, I like when things were simpler, and those days were simple. Man. They were simple, and I just miss them. And then, both my parents have since passed away. They had me very late in life. My mom was born in 23 and my father was born in 21. And so, and all my aunts and uncles, all that generation is gone. So we're now the older generation. And so I brought my nieces and my grandnieces, I should say, and to watch this show and tell player where you put on like Rapunzel and every 30 revolutions the slide changes and they're like, this is boring, where's my iPad? So I said, this was my iPad, sit there and watch it.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh. Yeah, I have picked up a few things from my past too, not as avidly as you have. I'm going to step away for a second and show you the one thing my wife bought this for me as a present. I'll grab it really quick.
I love it because I have so many.
I do the same thing. I go on. I bought plenty of books from my childhood toys. So.
I don't know if this will be familiar to you at all.
Tell me.
Major Matt Mason.
Oh, Major Matt Mason. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh
and
my gosh.
He had this. He was a big deal like in the late 60s, of course, when we're landing on the moon and 2001 had come out, and I was way into space toys, and I loved this guy because I was one of those strange kids. I liked the more realistic toys.
Yes.
That actually could be possible somehow.
Yes.
And he had these books, and I don't have any of the books, but like the little big books. And I had a Major Matt Mason little big book that told his story, and it was like this comic book thing, and I absolutely loved it. And I was telling my wife about it just over dinner one night many years ago. And then suddenly on my birthday, I get this present, and it's like my major. I've got a couple of them in his little space cart and everything. And I wept. I absolutely wept because it just, I look, every time I look at it, I am sitting on my floor with the shag carpet and playing with this toy. And look, that's what it is. I get it.
Yes. And I will tell you, that is exactly the image I have of myself in my den at home on our tile floor on Sunday afternoon watching Kukla, Fran and Ollie, whatever the movie was, Pippi Longstocking or something. And knowing that I had to go back to school on Monday, and you know how I feel about school. And those like I literally have, I can like literally transport myself in a meditative way back to that time. Now, from a therapeutic point of view, when my wife said, it seems like you were happier when you were younger, my therapist said, no, because it was a time where you knew how to pacify and console yourself. Because I spent a lot of time alone as a kid. Like I was the sixth of 6 children. And so I was alone a lot in my house. And those are the things that just bring me comfort. Like some have comfort food. Mine are the toys. I just, a birdie bird.
But they were made so well in a way back then. Honestly, the quality of even though it was all still plastic and rubber and all that stuff, there was just something about the way they were made. They were very tactical and had weight to them. And
there was no planned obsolescence like we have.
I love that's fascinating.
The Mego superheroes were my favorite.
I like Batman. I mean, as a kid, I was more of a DC guy, but as I've gotten older, I'm much more of a Marvel guy because I love the X-Men series.
Oh, I love the now, out of all the characters you portrayed, which is closest to your heart?
Oh wow, I get that question a lot. It's really hard to decide, Jonathan, because so many of them have me in them, and when you're playing in that world, that's your favorite at the time. I have favorites for different reasons, like for the Angry Beavers, because it was my first, series where I got to actually create the character. And I love the writing and the playfulness. But Invader Zim is, to me, like the writing, the voice acting, and the animation came together in such a way that I hadn't seen before. And it led the way to a lot of other successful shows to this day, like Rick and Morty that's a show where they started on Zim and were fans of Zim. So it kind of opened the door to those kind of shows.
You definitely see the influence.
Yeah. But Billy and Mandy, I really loved because I had free reign to play how I wanted to play. And Maxwell Adams was so gracious to me like I said, he let Kristen and I write 2 episodes of the show and stuff. So
you teach voiceover classes yourself now?
I do. I teach
Where can people go?
They can go to Richard Horvitz classes, plural, at gmail.com. And I teach something called the 5 steps to the art of playing pretend. And that's kind of what I touched on earlier. When all the comments are going to be, who cares? What has he worked on? How do we know that guy?
Well, before we I do want to ask one thing. I watched your old clips of when you were in the Mohos, right, with Fred Willard, the late great Fred Willard.
Yeah.
I watched old clips, and there are several so great that he looked like he was trying to hold it together when you were talking about something. Yeah. What was that like? What was that experience like working with him?
I loved Fred. Fred was very good to me and very generous. We did the Kimmel show together twice, and it would be something like Fred would call up and he'd say, "Hey, Richard, I got to do the Kimmel show tonight. You want to do a sketch?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." He goes, "Okay, the car will be over to pick you up," and we'd get in the back of this limo that they sent us, and we would work out a sketch, and we'd do it that night on the show. We wouldn't even rehearse, which is unheard of because those shows want to make sure that everything goes off smoothly. But I had really good heart-to-heart talks with Fred, and his wife Mary was also very good to me. She wrote plays, and Fred and I did plays together in Upland at Sam Kinnison's Family's Theater, and we spent a lot of time. And I'll tell you an interesting story. I said to Fred one time, "Do you remember the first time you realized you had money?" And he said, "I do." And I said, "Well, tell me about it." And he said, I was doing Fernwood Tonight. And we were doing, it was a strip show. So we were doing 5 shows a week. And I think at the time I was making like $1,200 a week, which was unheard of. And he said, and I was walking through Westwood and I saw a shirt in the window and I said, "Wow, that's a nice shirt." And I thought to myself, wait a minute, I can buy that shirt. Went in and he bought 5 of them. I mean, the thing about Fred was we used to call him the mayor of the other world because his mind was always somewhere else. True story. We went to see a play at the Taper one day, and they were sitting down front, and I was back a ways in the theater, and we were both at the same thing. And the play was awful. So at the act break, we went to this place called the Brasserie that was down the stairs from the music center, and we went to get drinks. And Fred goes, "Well, we have to get back. The act break is almost over." And Mary, his wife, said, "We're not going back, Fred. That play is horrible." He goes, "Well, I can't just not show up. I'm in the front. They saw me there. They know me." I'm like, she goes, "Then you go. We'll wait here." So he goes back for the second act. And we're sitting there having a drink. And like 20 minutes later, Fred shows up and Mary says, "What'd you do?" And he goes, "Oh, you're right. The second act was worse." And she goes, "So you got up in the middle of the scene and left where everyone can see you leaving?"
Oh, good grief. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he was.
What show? No one watches this. What
was the play? There was a period of time. Where they just had a really bad set of plays that were going on. The seasons were really bad at the Music Center, and then.
What are you appearing in next? What are you doing next?
So there's a show on YouTube called Helluva Boss, which is it's created by a woman named Vivian Medrano, Vivzy Pop, who grew up watching Billy and Mandy and Invader Zim and was a fan of mine, and she created this character. Well, she's one of those people on YouTube that has 6 million subscribers and 12 million views for every episode we put out.
God.
And she came to me and said, "I've written this role for you. There's musical in it." And I'm the voice director, and I star as one of the co-stars of the show. And she's got a big deal coming out with another show that I'm voice directing that I can't talk about, but it is on YouTube. It's called Helluva Boss. I will warn you, it's graphic and profane. So if you look it up, be warned.
I can't wait.
Yes. Well, we'll have you back then when it comes on. So-
I'd love that. I'd love that. I hope I answered your questions, Jonathan and Ike, because I have a tendency to ramble sometimes.
No,
that's
that's what we look forward to. I mean, it's we stress out about what we're asking to hopefully cover enough material, but it's such a joy to hear people talk so much more in depth about these topics and their careers, and it's lovely. So no, not at all. I mean, I was riveted. I had to remember to jump in here because sometimes I forget. I get so caught up in what I'm listening to that I forget. Oh, I'm still part of the show here. So no, it was,
and like
it
I
was
said,
wonderful.
the same thing. I'm fanboying over here when you're talking here too. So that's people come in to see what you're going to say. No one gives a damn what I'm going to say. So they just say, ask this question, ask that question. So.
Yeah, I'm it's like my wife, Kristen, and I sometimes will listen to something or an interview I've done or read, and she'll say like, you talk a lot. I'm like, yeah, have you met me?
Yeah.
We've only been married for, we've only been together for 30 years.
This has been, and by the way, you keep mentioning Dean Cameron. He
Yes.
is on the list of people that I'm going to reach out to, by the way, that I was planning on reaching out to. So I was going to. Dean, if you're watching.
Dean, I'll tell Dean right now, because I'm going to talk to him today. Dean and I do this thing called Some Kind of Joke, and
Which
they're
I,
just
on
these-
YouTube,
on YouTube, yeah.
right? Which I watched as well.
Thank you. And we do them just because the pandemic was on and we were stuck at home. So, but we actually have filmed them. We've actually done union contracts on them and shot some of them.
Wow.
Just basically telling classic jokes in a narrative form, which was Dean's idea. And so I produce and I act in some of them, and Dean directs and acts in some of them. So, yeah.
That's how much of a summer school fan I am. I'm just telling
Yeah.
you.
Well, you know whose studio we used is Brad Savage's studio. I don't know.
Brad
if
was
you-
on here. Brad
Yeah.
has been here. Right?
Brad and Greg Grumberg, they have a studio that's
Wow.
amazing, in North Hollywood, and that's where we shot these things. They're such great. I
Wow.
love Brad.
Well, huge
And
fan, and again, thank
What's
you.
your son's name?
So I'm very
Oh
happy.
man,
about
David,
that.
it's time
David.
to go hero. There, that's for you, David.
Thank you. I appreciate that. He'll love that. He'll absolutely love that. Thank you so much.
Got it. You got it.
And again, this has been Pop Culture Retro on behalf of Ike Eisenmann and myself, Jonathan Rosen. We thank Richard Horvitz, and please subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.